Do you think maybe they might have had this kind of thing back in the Bible time?
So we were here the first Sunday.
I remember driving up to Pleasant View Elementary School.
First impressions of 24 Church, I remember there was just a lot of excitement.
We got out of the car, there were greeters there. Everybody was so friendly. They were opening the doors for us.
We walked in and Bon Jovi's You Give Love a Bad Name was playing as we walked into the church, and I thought, this is different.
If I recall, the very first service, I was counting from the first Sunday, it was 69 people.
There was this buzz in the air.
There was a light show, and the pastor had pink hair, and they were playing AC/DC, and it was so not.
Definitely like no other church we'd ever been to.
Really, everybody there was just really excited to be there.
First time at 24, it just felt like that's where I was supposed to be.
The atmosphere was very upbeat. So many people were very friendly.
I absolutely loved it.
It was just home.
Some crazy man up front with rainbow hair preaching the service.
That was the first time I really started getting to know him. Of course, that was 20 years ago, and I had a little more hair then, and Chris had, well, what Chris has, you know, pink hair or purple hair, whatever it might be.
Chris's legacy will always be that purple hair.
We were impressed with his urgency and excitement and his
hair. Yeah.
Wild hair.
Without a doubt, it's the hair.
Never seen no preacher that looked like that.
Yeah, I knew him well enough that that didn't scare me off.
And he seemed very, very excited about the church and the ministry and
what God was about to do.
Yes, that drew us in.
Chris had, such an infectious passion and energy for, talking about Jesus, for preaching the word, for sharing the gospel.
Chris, you never could tell what he was going to talk about, look like, or whatever, but he was always, seemed like he was talking to me when he was giving his sermon.
And during the sermon, Chris threw pepperonis at us because he was talking about making a pizza as his illustration, and he threw pepperonis. We got hit by flying pepperonis our first Sunday there.
It was apparent that he had no fear.
I mean, it never was the same old thing.
One of the best set designs was the Out of the Box series, and we actually made a 5-foot tall takeout Chinese box.
And I think everybody really was inspired by just how creative and how unique of an approach he had to preaching the gospel.
It was a good sermon and lots of good music.
When we walked in and heard the worship music, it was definitely geared more towards our taste, our style.
My first impression of 24, loud.
We liked our music a little louder.
Yeah, we're loud.
It definitely was louder.
We came in and I was like, wow, we are here. Okay.
If you don't like loud music, this is not probably the best place for you to come.
But they've got earplugs in the
But we
lobby.
do have earplugs if you need them, yes.
But it was incredible to see the passion.
I can't sing, so it's great because I can't hear myself when I sing.
Because they crank the volume up
Because
so
the volume's
loud.
up so loud, yeah. So I can feel like I can completely worship and not have to worry about the person in front of me hearing me sing off tape. Yeah.
There were people that were one and done, but probably for every individual that left, 2 came.
More and more people kept coming in, and we had to keep adding more and more folding chairs to accommodate those people.
Looking for something different.
Each Sunday we saw growth, and it just kept growing and growing.
The next thing I know, I was a big part of the children's ministry with Aaron, and it was a lot of fun. As a high schooler, I was able to scratch a lot of creative itches with performing, and it was an absolute privilege to be able to get to do that with Aaron.
When I started 24, my best friend invited me. We had grown up going to youth together, and she invited me. She was like, oh, you gotta come to this cool church. Preacher's got crazy hair.
My first experience, I guess, because we had always grown up in churches that didn't have the loud music and stuff.
I grew up in a small Methodist church, so you didn't have loud music. You had your choir, and you did not have a band. And we would take church trips where you go see cool bands and have a great speaker. Well, then I started 24, and you had that every week.
So the music was a big one for me.
The band really kind of drew me in from the beginning.
I was like, whoa, it was like a full band, but it was pretty cool, so I liked that.
The worship was something I hadn't experienced like that before.
The music in the beginning, was pretty wild and crazy even compared to what it is now.
So that was a little bit of a shocker for me.
You know, how Nathan and them were leading worship at the time and creating that experience.
Worship can be wild and free and passionate and wonderful.
You know, have the Holy Spirit move through you and just really authentically and genuinely worship God.
As principal here on Monday mornings, I would get phone calls sometimes from people saying, Mr. Mickey, what kind of concert's going on over there on Sundays? And then I said, well, let me tell you, I'm not exactly sure, but I keep hearing that somebody really famous shows up every Sunday. And, you know, it's free, so you probably ought to just come check it out.
Everybody was just kind of wearing blue jeans and t-shirts, and it wasn't, you didn't have to dress up and feel like you were had to be all fancy to come to church. You could just be who you wanted to be, so I liked that.
It was more for younger people, but that's what drew me in.
It was almost like a youth group for adults.
It was essentially the adult version of the exact same thing we were doing back in Cardival in our youth ministry.
It was kind of like an extension of what we're doing for youth ministry. And
like going to a youth group, except it was for big boys and girls.
The only difference is now we didn't have anybody telling us what we couldn't do, and we also had a much smaller budget.
I think the goal was to reach a large number of people who were not involved in church, had no plans of going to church, and the target audience was the young college, young adult. So we were out to reach the ones who had no church home.
I came the first week and was sold. I mean, it was just a different environment. It was new. It was, I don't know, you just walked in and it felt different.
the kids essentially have more or less grown up at 24, taking part in Fuel, now the Sunday schools and
Kids Church.
Kids Church.
That's what's cool is 24 is our family. So, you know, to me, like being able to start the church and serve every Sunday and our family grow there, and then now to see it 20 years later and it's successful, and I mean, that's a God thing.